All right. Hello and welcome to tonight's live stream. This is episode 13. If you're just joining us for the first time, have no fear. You don't need to have been here for the first 12 episodes. If you are back and you've been to other episodes, welcome back. You guys know that you are in store for some fun tonight. We are we are moving right along with this e-commerce site. We are to the point where we've got the Stripe integration mostly done. We got a few things to wrap up here at the beginning of the video with Stripe integration, and then we're going to jump into PayPal's integration, which is called Braintree. They built their own payment gateway, and it's a lot more modern than traditional PayPal. It's more in line with Stripe, and I think it's more readily available into more countries than Stripe. But that's not the point. The point is to show you how to integrate with APIs, and it doesn't matter if it's a payment gateway or a shipping API or any other API. It all pretty much works the same way. So I appreciate all of you that are here. I know for a lot of you it is super early in the morning or very late at night, and I appreciate that, and I will do my best to make this worth your while for staying up or getting up early. And I also see that there are a lot of people from a lot of countries here, and I can't tell you how much of a blessing that is to me. That's such an encouragement, and I can't believe that I get to be a part of this. And so although our live streams aren't ever huge or anything like that, I think they're meaningful, and I think they're making an impact in a positive way in people's lives. Right on, Steven. Have fun, man. All right, so I have some things to share with you guys before we get started. But first, I want to remind you guys that these are available in Bitbucket. The source code from where we left off last week. We have every episode there in Bitbucket. So let me jump over to my screen and show you that really quick. And then I'm going to show you guys some cool stuff that I've been working on and some things like that. Hello. What is that? High sighting to the moon. Hello. All right, so if you go to bitbucket.org/parhamcurtis, you'll see my public repositories here. And if you look for the live e-commerce YouTube course, that is the one we're working on right now. And then if you go to source and then look right here, this is your branch list. And you can see that starting with episode 3 all the way up to episode 13, we have each where we left off at each episode right here. So if you want to check your work, or if you're just starting, go ahead and grab episode 12. That's where we left off in the last video, and carry on through this video. I do recommend that you don't try to type along with me. Just kind of watch, ask questions, and learn, and then go back and do all your own coding at a later time. Otherwise, you may not be able to keep up. Okay? Not that I type fast or anything, but we will be doing a lot, and it's a lot to follow along with. So I do appreciate you guys being here. So let me show you a few things. One of my subscribers, Artur, he has been helping a lot with the front end site. He's been making a lot of commits to that lately. Hopefully we'll have the front end site for the Rua PHP framework out soon. He also designed a logo that I like, and I want to show you guys real quick. I showed you guys a few other logos, but he sent this one just to see what I thought. And I actually really like this. I like a few things about it. One, I like the color scheme. It looks modern. I've always been a fan of green and purple together. And I think this is real clean looking. The other thing I like about this is the whole spirit behind Rua PHP is a breath of fresh air, or light. It's lightweight, and I think a bird symbolizes that really well. So hat tip to Artur for taking that on and doing that. You guys let me know what you think about it. This will probably, unless something changes, this will probably be the logo we go with for Rua PHP when we do release that publicly. The next thing that I wanted to show you guys is that I have been working on documentation for the framework. It's got a long way to go still, but I've done a lot of work. Now I do have an entire getting started tutorial that's separate from this, and that is pretty much done. But I did get started on the main documentation. The main area where I've done the most work is in database migrations. So if you look here in database migrations, I have documented every action or every method that's available within a database migration. So it has the information on how to generate a migration, and then every single thing that I have available so far, which I've also added some functionality, and we'll get to that in a moment. But you can see that we have all of this going on here, this documentation, and then finally at the end it shows how to run migrations. And so we have code examples on the right, and then we have the documentation here in the middle, and then we have a search bar, and you can go through the menu navigation. So I'm going to be going through the entire framework and documenting every bit of it. If any of you guys have a passion for writing documentation and want to help out with this process to make it go a little quicker, let me know, and I'd be happy to take some help in this. But I am working on it. I just want to give you guys a quick update on that. Excuse me. The last thing that I want to show you guys is I've made several improvements to the framework. So I'm going to briefly just go over what those are, and then I'm going to go ahead and update our project with the with the new updates that I've added to the framework. So I'm just going to very quickly give you a high overview of what I've done since the last live stream on the framework. One thing that wasn't a really big deal that I added though is inside of form helpers I added a hidden input method that builds a hidden input out, so you can use that now in form helpers, which wasn't a big deal. So that's been added. I added a new setting in the config file that allows you to set a setting for the ability to run database migrations from the browser rather than going in and having to comment out a line of code inside the run migration script. There's now just a boolean that you set in the config file, so you can easily do that and then set it back. So that was one thing. And then I added new functionality to just a new function basically, or a method to the migrations where you can run raw database queries. So there's now a query method that's been added. And then one of the bigger and cooler changes was inside the view. Before we only had like a head or a body that you could build out. I've changed that, and now you can add anything you want and then use that inside the layout. So instead of just head and body, you could do a footer or whatever, and you just define that with the start and end methods and then use that inside of the footer. So you guys can look at the documentation when I get that done for the views to see how that works, but just know that those changes have been made. It shouldn't affect your projects now at all if you merge this stuff in. Now, I'm going to show you in a moment how to update your framework, and it's super easy. But if you are watching this in the future, please don't follow these next instructions. If you're watching live or the next couple days, it's fine to do this. In the future though, I just suggest that you grab the actual code from the Bitbucket account, because in the future there's going to be so many changes to the framework, it may actually screw you up to update your framework to a further than where we are in this process, if that makes any sense. Okay, so without any further ado, I'm going to jump in. Hi Denise, hello. I'm going to jump right in and update the framework so that I have all the new stuff, and then we're going to finish up our Stripe integration and then do our PayPal Braintree integration tonight. And so I'm super excited about this. I'm excited for you guys to see the power of using abstract classes so that you don't have to change any of your code, and you can add new gateways as you like. I don't care if you had 50 of them, you could do it this way and not have to change any of the code in your main application. You could just choose it from the config file and you're good to go. So here we go. Let me jump over to a terminal. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do a git remote -v to make sure I have upstream, because I did fork this from the repo, I have upstream set to the Rua MVC framework. And so what I'm going to do is just do git fetch upstream. Okay, and then it shows me all the new tags and everything like that. So the next thing that I want to do is just do a git merge, and then I'm going to do upstream master. Let's see. So it's telling me my config file is gonna have a merge conflict basically. Not a super huge deal. So let me go. I have some some things on my live thing. So let me just add those real quick. And I'm going to commit those. And that was just from me updating my Stripe API keys so that they worked for tonight. All right, so then I'm going to do a git merge upstream master. And this worked. However, it says that I have a merge conflict, and that's probably in the config file. So we're going to go here and we'll look at this. So yeah, it's basically just from my config file merging that in, and you'll likely have merge conflicts too if you do it inside your conflict, or I'm sorry, inside of your config file. So what I need to do is I'm just going to update this to choose what I need here. So I'm going to use that, and then on this one, just basically define fix and merge conflicts. That's it. Let me see if there are no other merge conflicts, so this is good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and stage that. All right, so now that I've done that, yeah, that should be good. All right, so now that we've done that, we have the new changes for the basically for the that I've added for the framework. Geez, I can't speak tonight. Also, it is storming fairly bad here, so, and I'm in a metal building, so if it's, and it died down a little bit right before we started, but if it gets loud from the rain, just please excuse that. Hopefully you won't hear it too much through the microphone. It's a little distracting for me, but hopefully it won't come through very much. Okay, so where we left off last week is we had the ability to go through with the checkout process, and it would actually do the Stripe integration part, but there's still a little bit more that we need to do on our end to finish this up, at least for now. I mean, there's a lot more to do, but a couple things I noticed right off the bat: this submit payment button's not styled correctly. We want to go ahead and take care of that. And then the other thing is when you submit this, it basically is giving us an error message, and I'll show you why that is. And it's just because there's actually not a problem with what we've done. We just haven't finished everything up yet. So basically what we want to be able to do right out of the gate is we have this transactions table, and when the transaction goes through Stripe or anywhere else, we want to be able to add that transaction in our own database so that we can easily it's kind of a cache for all of our transactions, and we can easily show that in the admin area on the dashboard and things like that without doing API calls to all the different payment gateways. We do want to store these things here, and this is actually the reason that we have that error message, because it's not adding this row, so we didn't get to that last week. So we need to do that. We have a thank you page that we need to have them forwarded to, and so let's go ahead and take a look at the code here. So we have a few methods here that haven't been completed. So what happens is, just a brief overview before we get started, we have the checkout action. And when the checkout action happens and they post the form, it comes here inside this if statement. And basically it does a cross-site request forgery check. It creates the transaction and assigns all of the form values, in which at this time, all the form values are just going to be shipping information, and then it runs the validate shipping. So if shipping validates, it's going to change the step. So we have a two-step form. The first step is just going to be our shipping, and then the second step is the card details, or the checkout credit card details. So if it doesn't pass the shipping validation, it doesn't move on to the next step. But if it does, it will move on to the next step. And if this is being posted and it's the step 2, it runs this gateway process form method. Okay, so the gateway process form method in this example is Stripe, because that's the gateway we're using right now. And it runs this process form method right here. So that's how that's working. So after you submit the card, it comes back from Stripe, and they're like, "Yep, that's all good." It runs this process form. So this process form then takes. See, Stripe sends us back a token because we don't want the credit card information ever hitting our servers. We want to be compliant with law, and so in order to do that, we need to just have Stripe or PayPal or whoever's doing the credit card information, they need to handle that security of the credit card. That doesn't come through our servers. Instead, what they do is send us a token. It's a short-lived token that we can then use to actually make the charge. And that's what this is right here, this Stripe token. So then what we do is we are passing the amount, the currency, and a description, and then the source is that token I was talking about. And then this runs the charge method, and the charge method simply makes the API call, which it uses the Stripe SDK, which we installed last week. It uses the Stripe SDK, and it creates a charge, and the charge is created, and then basically that's where we left off. The things that we need to do is we need to handle the response, which we'll do here in this process form, and then we need to create that transaction. Hello, Tony. Welcome. All right, so let's just get going on the handle charge response method. Let me go ahead and pull up my so right here, let me give myself a little breathing space here. And right here, this handle charge response, what we want to do is we want to set the we want to know if this charge was successful or not, or if there was an error of some sort. So what we'll do is we're going to set this charge success, and that's going to be equal to the charge, and then what they do is they send back an outcome object and then network status. This is what Stripe sends us back, okay? And if that is equal to approved underscore by network, then that will set the charge success to true. Else it's going to set it to false, okay? So that's what we're doing with that line of code. The next thing that we want to do is we want to set a message to the user. So if there is some sort of like error message, they'll send us a reason back, maybe the PIN that they entered wrong, or the zip code's wrong, or the 3-digit CVC number is wrong on the back there, and they'll let us know all that, so we can take that information and we can give that back to the user. So that's message to user. That's where we're going to store that. So then what we can do is we're going to say charge, and then that comes back in the outcome object, and that is actually seller underscore message. Okay. Oops. So that right there, this is all we're going to do for handle charge response. Okay, we're just taking the response back from Stripe and setting an approval and a message back in our object here that we can then later use. All right, the bigger issue here that we would need to do is we're going to want to create a transaction in our database, and we can store this information there. So let's go back now up to this process form, and what we'll do here in the process form is we're going to say this handle charge response, and then we're passing that charge object into that. Okay, so that's where we're actually going to run it in the process form method. And then the next thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and create the transaction. So the way that's going to look is we're going to assign a variable just called tx, short for transaction. You guys can call it the full word if you want. I'm just going to call it tx. But what we want to do is run this create transaction. And what that's going to do, we're going to pass the charge object down into that. And this method right here, this create transaction, this is what is in charge of creating that row in the database. Okay, so it's not going to be difficult. We just gotta kind of parse the information we get back from Stripe and save that in there. So what we'll need to do is we're going to create a transaction, and that will be, we'll instantiate a new transactions object, which is that model we built last week, that transactions model. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to say tx. The first thing we'll do is give it the cart ID. So we want to store that cart ID, and that is equal to this cart ID. All right, and then we'll do, we need to tell it the gateway. So that is equal to static gateway. And let me just, oops, that needs the $sign. Let me just make sure that I've added that here at the top of the file. And I have not. And so what right here at the top, what we're going to do is just add public static gateway, and that's just going to equal stripe. Okay, each one of these gateways we build will have this public static gateway, and it'll be different for each one. It'll match what's in the config file. And then so that'll be good for that. And then the next thing that I want to do is we want to give this thing a type. Basically, we're filling in all of the rows that we created in our database migration last week. But what this is in this context is this is basically Stripe allows us to do more than just credit cards. We could do Apple Pay, we could do Google Pay, PayPal, things like that. And so this will set what the type of payment was. So they send back a method details object and a type property on that. So we're just going to go ahead and grab that from them. The next thing that we have in our database is amount. So we need to store that. And that is just going to be this grand total. Okay. And then success, this is going to be equal to, now this is a Boolean, so we're just going to say, we're going to use a ternary operator, and we're going to say this charge success. So remember, we in our handle charge response, we set this property in our object here. So we're going to say if that's true, then we want to store 1 in the database, because remember we used a Boolean. Else we want to store a 0. Okay. The next one that we have is the charge ID. Now this is going to be the ID we get back from Stripe, so that later we can go back and do an API call and grab this if we need to, or do refunds or anything like that. So it's important that we have this, and that one's super easy. It's just going to be charge ID. The next one that we want to store is going to be a reason. Now this is going to be our reason for a failure or something like that. Okay, so it's not going to be the human readable one. We want to store the reason like that we get back from the API, and so that will be charge outcome and then reason. Okay. I know this is kind of boring, but we got to build this out because we want all this information. So we're just going to go through it. Card brand. Now, if they use a credit card like a Visa or a MasterCard or anything like that, we'll want to make sure we're storing that information so that we can show them, hey, you bought this with a Visa, and then we'll also store the last 4 digits of the card. So we're not breaking any PCI compliance, but we'll say, you bought this with a Visa ending in 4242. You get it? So that's what we're doing there. So that will be payment. And I can show you guys how I figured this stuff out too. And I will. So just hang tight. Let's just get this filled out. But the charge brand will be the payment method, and then details, card, and then brand. Okay, so that's how we get that information from Stripe. The next one is going to be really similar. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, oops, I'm going to go ahead and, whoa. Let's see here. I don't know why. There we go. Move my keyboard. So I got a little typo there. Dang it. Alright, so this one, what we want to store here is the last 4 digits of the card. So we're just going to say last 4. And that again is in the payment method details in the card object. And they also call that last 4. Okay. The next one, and we're getting close here, we're almost done, is we're going to go ahead and put the shipping information right here. So the name will be charge, and then they send us back shipping, and then name. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and copy this, and the next one's gonna be really similar. So this one is shipping address 1, and what they call that in Stripe is just line 1. So it's in the shipping object and it's line 1. The next line you can guess is just going to be line 2, and so that's shipping address 2. The next one is going to be the city, and they call that city as well. Okay. The next one is state. And then the next one is we need the zip code. So we store that as zip, and they call that postal code. Again, if you guys don't know why I'm doing this, I'm going to show you. So just you need all this, but I'm going to show you how I figured out how to build this out in just a moment. So the last one was the shipping country, and for both of these it's going to be country. Oops. So shipping country, and then there we go. Alright, the next thing we want to do here is we want to save this transaction. So we just say tx save, and then we're going to return the transaction. So that's it. So that right there will create this transaction. Now, I told you I would show you how I figured all that out, and the way that I did that is right here in this charge, where it ran the charge function and made the API call back from Stripe. I went ahead and just put a dump and die here, and I dump and died the charge so I could see exactly what comes back from their API call. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So if I go ahead and check out and I fill out all this information, all right, and I hit submit payment. Oh, dang it, I forgot to include that. So 1 second. Right here, I'm just going to add use core H. And let's try that again. Yes, this is somewhat of a tedious process, guys, when you're setting this up. You're going to do a lot of trial and error when you're working with APIs just to kind of see what they have. Hopefully they have good documentation. But now that you can see, this basically does a var dump and it kills the script. So now I can see everything that comes back from Stripe's API call. So this is what happens when you charge. They send back a Stripe charge object, and then you remember how I said, you know, we're going to store that ID. I just kind of dug down in this database, this data structure, and found everything that I wanted. So for example, if you look down here, here's that outcome. So you go into outcome and then you can see the network status. You can see risk level, seller message. So this is that payment complete. Type authorized. You can see if it's paid or not. They send back a boolean there if it's paid. The payment method, they send back a card. This is a card ID. We could store that, but I'm not going to store that right now. Then they send this card object back, and this card object had the brand, which was Visa, so we got that. And then it has somewhere in here it has the last four. So CVC, let's see. Here's the type of card. Oh, it's right here. Here's that last four. So we got the 4242 right there. Okay. And then if you kind of go down, it gives us all kinds of information like this receipt URL, which gets emailed out if you have emails turned on for that, for Stripe. And then just kind of going down here, just look at all this. They give you all the information you need. And this is where I got all that information we just typed in to build that transaction out, okay? So I just literally took the response back from Stripe and I dumped it on my screen so I could see it all, and then I went ahead and filled in those values right here. So payment method details, type, you know, we got the shipping and then name. It was all right in here. You can see that there's billing details. Here's there should be shipping in here somewhere. See if I can find that. Maybe it's higher up. Yeah, so it looks like there may be actually a problem sending this information because city. Oh, hang on, that's billing details. Here's the shipping information, and that came back as null. So we have a problem there somewhere. I don't know what's going on there. We'll have to look at that. Not sure why that didn't work. So, oh, I think I know why that didn't work. So what we need to do, and that's really good to find out too, is we don't have any shipping information. So why isn't there shipping information? Well, chances are it's because we didn't send them the shipping information. So let's go back and look at our form and make sure we're sending it to them. And I can tell you that we probably didn't do that last week. So if I go to views and we go to card forms, we have Stripe right here, okay? And we are not in our form, we don't have any of that shipping information. Now, if you look inside the cart, we had the shipping address form. All of these need to get sent along to that next form, okay? And that's really easy to do because we're already posting that information. So let me go ahead and pull that up on my reference material here. Make sure I don't screw this up. And okay, so what we'll do is right here in the stripe.php, this is our form, and I'm just going to add some hidden inputs up here, okay? So right underneath this, I'm going to do, see if I pulled in, okay, I do have form helpers, so we just need to echo out, and this will only work if you have the newest version of the framework, otherwise you have to use regular hidden inputs like this, but I'm going to use the form helper that I just built, so it's hidden input. Okay, and then that gets the first the name. So we need just name for this first one, and then it gets the value, and the value here is going to be this tx name. Okay, that's it. So now I'm going to copy that, and we're just going to add all of these in here. So the next one that we're going to send them is going to be shipping address 1, and this will be shipping address 1. Copy that, and then we'll just go ahead and replace those ones with 2. Copy that, and we're going to replace shipping address 2 with city, state, and zip. I'm not going to send the country. You guys can send the country if you want. I'm not doing that for right now. So we have those hidden inputs now. So now the cart controller is going inside of this checkout action. It's going to have that in step 2. All right. The next thing that we need to check to make sure that that happens is inside of our Stripe gateway. We need to actually parse that and send it to them in a way that they need it. Okay. So we're going to need one more method here. So I'm back in Stripe gateway.php, and I'm going to create right here above this create transaction one more public function, and this could actually be protected because I'm not going to use this outside of here probably. So I think I'm just going to make this protected. So protected function, and I'll just call that parse shipping address. Now the reason I'm doing this is because we called our fields something different. We called them like shipping address 1, shipping address 2, but in Stripe they're called something else. They're called line 1, line 2, and so we need to send that to them in that way. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our post information here, and we're going to return an array, and this array is just going to basically map how they want it compared to how we're sending it to them. Okay, so basically line 1 will be the post shipping address 1. Okay, so I'm just going to go through now and copy this. Line 2 was shipping address 2. Then they had city, and we post that as shipping city. If you guys have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to stop me and ask. Okay, I know I'm moving quick, but I really want to get through this payment gateway stuff tonight. Okay, and then the last one we want to send is postal code, and that was, oops, that is shipping zip. And then also I think we can send them name like this as well. And we were just posting that as name. So we need to parse that information. So the way that we get that into Stripe, if you look at their documentation, you just send shipping and then you send the array. And actually, let's not put name there. Let's just leave the address there. Okay, and the way that's going to look is right here inside this data. Remember, this data right here is what we're posting to Stripe. This is our API call to Stripe. So we're going to add one more thing here, and we're going to say shipping. Okay, and then that gets address, and the address is going to be this parse shipping address, and then we're going to pass post right down to it. Okay, so that'll set that associative array right there. And then the next one we'll send them is just name, and name is going to be post name. That's it. Okay, so now when we go back and we run this again, if all goes well and I didn't make any silly typos, which I may have, because I always do. But if I do that and we check it now, we get this response back, and if we look for shipping, let's see here, shipping. So now we got, instead of null on our shipping object, we did get information back from Stripe, so we know we're passing that to them correctly. So we got city, line 1, line 2, that all looks good, postal code, and state. And so that is good. So that was under address, and then we had right here under shipping and name, we have my name. So that is all working as expected. We're sending Stripe, and in fact, if we go to Stripe and we look at our payments, this is our most recent payment right here. If I click on that, if you scroll down here, Stripe actually stores the recipient and the shipping address inside of Stripe too. So that's because we sent that information to them, and now we have access to that information. Okay. So yeah, that's a pretty good deal there. This metadata is probably something like we could send our cart ID, so we may do that in the future, just to store the our internal cart ID with each one of these transactions, so that we could do some cross-referencing later. But that's how that works, guys. That's exactly what I did. There's nothing magic about what I did, but that is how I figured out what information to store in a database. So now what we can do is actually go down here and get rid, and we'll comment out this dump and die, and we'll make sure that our create transaction works now. So let's go back and try out our transaction again. Okay. And let's see what happens. So we got, I had a typo here obviously because it's undefined method, handle charge response. So that is because I have, let's see, that's going to be here in the process form, and that's because I forgot the H right there. So handle charge response, let me just highlight that and make sure I spelled it right down here. Handle charge response. Okay. So once again, let's go and try that out. Hopefully I don't have any other mistakes. Submit that. All right, so now it tells us, okay, we're getting a little further. It tells us that transactions is not found, and that's probably because I didn't import that. So I'm going to go up here to the top of the Stripe gateway, and I did not import that. So I'm going to go ahead and say use app models, and then transactions. Okay. So you guys can see, like, this is my exact process that I use. It, you know, I make mistakes and I figure them out by reading the error message. All right. So now we just have a few issues, it looks like, inside of our create transaction function. So we're getting closer and closer. So let's go ahead and take a look at at this. Let's go down here and see what I may have done wrong. So let's look at the error message first on line 56. Yeah, I accidentally did this, and it's supposed to be an underscore. So payment method details type. Okay, so that was a typo there. That probably fixes this. At least gets us to the one step closer to being done. Try again, see what messages pop up. All right, so add error message doesn't exist. And that is in our cart controller. So let's take a look at that. The cart controller, it's complaining that the add error message does not exist here. Now the reason it's getting here is because we're not actually sending this response back, so we still need to do that. But I'm concerned about why this isn't working. So let me take a look at that. That is a method on the model object. So if maybe I just spelled that wrong. So that should exist already on that object. So there's get error messages and it's add error message. So let me just copy that. Okay, it doesn't look like that was the issue. So let's take a look at up here and make sure that TX exists. Oh, I see. We're resetting it. Okay, this is all of our remaining issues is going to have to do with we're not sending anything back to this controller. So if you look here, we're actually setting a response and we're expecting a response back from that process form method. So if you look in our Stripe gateway, go back up here to our process form, we're not actually returning anything here. So we do have the transaction and we have the success. We have everything we need now. We just need to return that information to our controller so they can use it. So what we're going to do is just return, we're going to return an array. And the first thing we'll do is set success. Now success is going to be this charge success. So that'll be either true or false. Our message is going to be this message to user. And then lastly, well, we need to send a couple more things. We're going to send back the transaction, and that is going to equal TX. And then we're going to send back the charge ID, and I'll show you why we're going to do that in a moment. So charge ID is just going to equal our charge ID. Okay? Now we should get a lot further. In fact, what should happen is if this is successful, it should redirect us to the cart thank you page. The cart thank you page is going to be an error because we haven't built that yet. Denise says, sometimes it's hard for me to find errors and I feel like I want to vomit. Yeah, let me just slow down for a second and I want to speak to that for a moment because I have a little bit of perspective on that. The thing is that's exactly how I felt too early on, is trying to find how to solve bugs and do the debugging process, and it would take me a really long time to find typos and things like that. And the encouragement that I want to give you guys is that will get better. You will get faster and faster at finding errors, and instead of feeling like you're going to vomit when you're trying to fix errors or find them, just take time and slow down and realize that it's part of the learning process. And what will happen is you will start recognizing those error messages that are on the screen, and a lot of times you're going to know the top one or two things to look for if you see that error message. And that's just going to take time. There's no real quick way. I can't just give you guys, here's how to solve errors, because there's too many of them. But what I can say is pay attention to what the error message says. Typically the error message will have a line number. So what I usually do is start a few lines above that and look and see if I've missed any semicolons. And then I kind of go down to the line and I start looking through it and see if I made any typos. But just try to read what it says and it's going to give you a good clue. Like for instance, let me switch back to my screen. For instance, on mine, it says there's a call to a member function add error message on null. So if I were to slow down and read that, it didn't say that my method didn't exist. It said it couldn't call that on null. And so if I look back on line 73, right here, it tells me what line to look at in the cart controller. If I look at line 73, it's trying to call that add error message on this transaction. So what I did was I looked up and I said, hey, this transaction is supposed to be set from the response. So then I was like, okay, well then look back at the response, and I hadn't done it yet. So now that's why I just went and did this response. So this return should return TX, which is that transaction object, and then I could do that. So that's it. And by the way, Denise, I'm sure you're beautiful how you are, so you don't need to vomit over errors, and don't worry about that. Okay, so let's go here. Continue. Let's try it again and see if I have any more errors. Guys, this is literally like, you should never feel like you have to code something without making any mistakes. You're going to. You're watching me make mistakes over and over again. Okay. So mine just came back here, but I don't know what happened. So let's go now, and it didn't give me an error message, but let's check a few things. One, let's find out, did it create the transaction row in the database? And it did. And let's just kind of look through this transaction and make sure it has all the information that I expected to be here. Okay? It has the card ID, it has the gateway, the type, amount, the charge ID. Success is 0 for some reason, but we didn't get a reason on that, so we need to look into that. That's probably one of the bigger issues. We do not have shipping address information filled out, so that's a problem. So it looks like our shipping information, something's wrong with that, and then also we need to look at why the success is 0 here, okay? Although I do think the success is probably true, it's just probably some way we're saving it. So let's take a look at those couple things and fix those. So let's see, first let's look at the shipping situation. So we're saying shipping address 1. I see the problem. And actually I'm going to show you how to debug this. So again, what I would do is come back up here to see what my response is from Stripe. And then I would just submit this again, which they don't let you just write out. You can't just refresh the page. You actually have to go back and fill this. Oops. You actually have to go back and fill this information out again. I know what the problem is, but I want to show you guys what it is. All right. So if we look, and we're looking for our shipping information. So if I go and search for shipping, so if you look at here, they send shipping back as an object, and inside of that we have address, and then we have inside of that we have another object with our properties, city, country, line 1, line 2. So we can see how they send it back to us right here. Let's go now and look at the way that I'm storing this. I have the charge, shipping, line 1. Well, the problem is they have, this whole thing is the charge, then it has shipping, but then they have address and then line 1. So I'm missing address on all of these. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and stick a cursor on all these spots. So shipping, address, and then let's go ahead and make sure that name is going to be correct as well, which I think it is, because so it's shipping and then name is right underneath that. Yep, so it's outside of the shipping address. Okay, so that'll fix that. That's that issue. The next thing is this charge success. this is a problem. So let's look at why that is. So we have outcome and network status, and we're looking to see if that's approved by network. So let's take a look at that. So let's look for outcome. So we had outcome, network status, approved by network. All right, so let's see. Let me just copy this stuff, make sure I'm not making a silly typo somewhere. I'm gonna copy that. So network status, outcome, and I see the problem. There's a W right there. So that is a typo. So network status is supposed to be like that. But while I'm here, I'm just going to double check this approved by network thing. Copy that. And let's just paste that in. So yeah, just kind of getting through some of these typos. I'm fairly confident now that this is going to solve most of our issues. So let me go back now, and we want to comment out our dump and die and see if this works. With any luck, we will be about done with Stripe integration, and we can do our Braintree integration. Still need to change that submit button. All right, so now you can see that it took me to, it redirected to the cart thank you page. So let's go, and that's a good thing. I expected that error there because we haven't built that yet. But if I look here, it did add the new transaction with the ID of 4. And if you look back here, it is sending us to an ID of 4. And then let's just look through this and make sure we have everything. Success now is 1, which is what we expected. That should be, because 1 is true and 0 is false. And then we have all of our shipping information now, except for shipping country, because I'm not storing that. So yeah, this transaction thing looks correct now. That is all good. So let's just clean up a couple things, and we will be done with the Stripe integration for now. And we'll move on to get the same thing to the same point in the process for Braintree. So let's look at that. I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this dump and die. I don't need that anymore. In fact, for right now, I think I'm completely done with this Stripe gateway file, so I'm going to close that. Our button's incorrectly styled, so right here in the Stripe view, this is my view here. Let's go ahead and find that button, and it's right here. And I'm just going to go ahead and give this thing a class equal to button, button large, button success maybe. Let's do primary. All right, that should take care of that. Let's go back. I just want to double check that button. There we go, submit payment. It's off to the left a little bit. We could put it more in line if we want. So in order to do that, we could just wrap that in a div. We'll give that div a class equal to call medium 12. I'll move that up. Oops. All right. See how that looks. All right, so now that's in line with the form. So that's pretty good. The styling on this isn't perfect or anything like that, guys. That's not the point right now. But it is working. So we have our integration, and then it takes us to the thank you page. So let's go ahead and do the thank you page, and then we'll be done with the Stripe integration for now. The thank you page is really simple. You guys could put a lot of more effort into it if you'd like, but let's go ahead and just see, let me see if I can find that thank you. I guess it's not stored in here. All right. So let's get back to the thank you. There's a couple other issues as well that we need to wrap up. All right, so we're here and it's cart and then thank you. So we need a thank you action inside of our cart controller, and it's going to pass a parameter of the transaction ID along with it. So that's how we're going to know what the transaction is, to print out information on the thank you page. But there is one more thing before we do the thank you page that I want to do that I kind of forgot about for a second. And that is, I want, once someone purchases or completes the purchase inside of the cart, I want to go ahead and set that cart purchase value to true. So let me figure out where I did that. Oh, okay. So back in, I told you to close this, so I lied. But in Stripe, the Stripe gateway, in this process form, we're gonna do one more thing here before the return, and that's just gonna be a super easy check. We're gonna say if this charge success. So if the charge is successful, then what we're going to do is we're going to, I need to add in the carts model, and we're going to call a method here, right here. We're going to say carts purchase cart. And then what we're going to do is pass in the cart ID. So in this case, it's this cart underscore ID. All right, so we haven't actually done this purchase cart thing yet, and that is going to be so simple that I almost don't even need to show it, but we're going to do it anyway because we're doing this together, and so that's it. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to app, models, carts, and then what we're going to do is create a new public static function purchase cart. And that's going to accept cart ID as a parameter. And then all we need to do here is find the cart. So we're going to say cart is equal to self find by ID. And then we're going to put the cart ID in there. Then all we're going to do is say cart purchased is equal to 1. And then let me scroll this up a little bit. So then we just need to save that cart. And then if you guys remember, what happens is someone has a shopping cart, we store a cookie on their computer with their cart ID, and so we need to get rid of that so that so it doesn't pull that information up again if they go to the shopping cart. Okay, so all we have to do there is say cookie delete, and then we'll just pass in cart cookie name. Let me make sure I've imported cookie here to make sure this is going to work, and I have right there. So that will delete the cookie from their computer, and then we're going from their client, so yeah, their computer, and then we're just going to return cart. Okay, so that's all we need to do for purchase cart. So again, all we're doing is setting the value inside of our cart database. So if you look at carts, we have one cart right now, and purchased is set to 0, but after they purchase it, I want to set that to 1. Okay, so that's what we're doing here. We're finding the cart and setting purchase equal to 1 and saving, and then we're deleting the cookie on their computer, and then that's it. So then in the Stripe gateway, when it runs this cart purchase, all of that's going to happen. It's going to save that update to the cart item, and then it's going to delete their cookie. Okay, so that's the last step that we're going to do in this process form. Okay, so that's it. I do believe we're done with the Stripe gateway thing now, but let's go back now to the thank you page and build that out. So inside of our cart controller, we just need to add a new action. So let me get to that cart controller. Now remember, the cart controller is where they're being sent, and then we need an action called thank you. So thank you, and that's an action, and then we're passing in the transaction ID as a parameter. Okay, so then all we need to do is find that transaction. So we're going to say transaction is equal to transactions find by ID, and then this is coming from the URL, so we want to cast that to an integer for security purposes, and then boom. Okay, so that gets us our transaction, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to say this view transaction, and we're going to set that equal to our transaction that we just found. And then what we want to do is render our view. So we'll say this view render cart and then thank you. That's going to be our view. We haven't created that yet, but that will be, we're going to make that very simple as well. So let me get my reference out for that. All right. So now if I scroll down inside of our views, we go to a cart, and we're going to create a new file here, and we're going to call it thankyou.php. All right. So then what I want to do here is let's set the site title. So this set site title, and we're just going to set that equal to thank you. Okay, that's all we need to do there. The next thing that we want to do is we're going to say this start body. So that we're going to create some HTML here. Let's go down a few lines, and we'll do this end. So we're going to put all of our HTML right there. So let's get going. I'm going to do a div with a class of row. I keep thinking I set up emit on here, and I don't. So div with a class of row. Okay, and then we're going to give this, we're going to do a div there, and we're going to give this a class equal to call medium 8 offset medium 2, and then text center. We're just going to center the text. All right, and then there what we're going to do is do an h2 with a class equal to text info. And we'll just say thank you, like that. And then let's just do a paragraph and say your purchase of, and then we're going to put their amount here. So your purchase of, and we'll come back to that, was successful. Let's go ahead and put the amount here. So all we need to do here is open some PHP tags, and we're going to echo out number format, and then this tx amount, and then we're going to give that, we're going to format that to 2 decimal places. Okay, so that's it. That's all I need to do there. And then we're going to add another paragraph tag here, and we're going to say your purchase will be shipped to the following address. All right, so then I'm going to do another paragraph tag here, and we're just going to say, we're going to do a echo this transaction name, and then we'll do a break tag. and then we'll say echo this. Sorry about the rain, guys. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it's starting to pick back up. So this transaction action shipping address 1, and then again we'll just do another break tag. Next, what I want to do is I'm going to do an if statement. So I'm going to say if this if this tx shipping address 2 so if that's the case, then we're going to echo this transaction shipping address 2, and then we'll do a break tag. Almost done here. And then we're just going to echo out this tx shipping city, comma, space, this tx shipping state, space, this tx shipping zip. Okay, so that is it. We're just going to do a very basic and simple. Well, actually, I do want to add one more thing. Let's add a button to get out of here. So we're going to do an anchor here, and so we'll add a link and just say continue. And we're going to send them, let's just send them to the project root, which would be the home page. And let's give this a class equal to button, button large, button primary. Okay, so that's it. That's going to be our thank you page. So if I hit enter here, it says thank you. Your purchase of $335.87 was successful. Your purchase will be shipped to the following address: Curtis Parham, 123 Main Street, Suite 101, Washington, Missouri 63090. And if I hit continue, it takes us back to our home page. Now, you'll notice something interesting. If I hit cart, I do have my cart still here. And that's because I haven't run through this checkout process since I added the purchase. So let's go ahead and test that part out. So I'm just going to run through this checkout process one more time, and this should actually complete our shopping cart and make it purchased. Okay, so submit that, continue. Now if I go to cart, it should tell me that the cart is empty. So it did. It tells me your shopping cart is empty. Now I do have an issue here. On line 18, so let's go ahead and take a look at what that could be real quick. But it's still working. We don't have a shopping cart. It's 0 items. So I know that if I go and look at carts now and refresh, purchased is set to 1, and I don't have, the reason that this is shown is because I don't have a cookie set. So that's going to be really easy to fix. So let's go ahead and look at that real quick. So cart controller, if I go up to the index here, right here it's saying cart ID, and it's saying if cookie, the get function, there's a problem because it doesn't exist. So there's a couple ways I can fix this. I can put a check here to see if it exists. Else I could actually update this cookie get function, but that's framework. That I need to fix that in a framework, so I'm actually not going to do it here. So instead, what I'm going to do is just do a ternary, and what I'm going to do is say if cookie exists, cart cookie name. So if that exists, we're going to set it to that cookie. Else, we're just going to set this equal to false. That takes away the error, and it says your shopping cart's empty, continue shopping, and then that takes us back to the home page. So that kind of concludes our Stripe checkout process. It looks like everything's working as expected there. So let's just, real quick, I'm just going to go through the whole process as a user, just go through the user experience of this. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and even log out because they won't be logged in, and I just want to see if this works. So let's buy Splendor. I'm going to add that to the shopping cart. I'm going to continue shopping, and then I'm going to also buy Lords of Waterdeep. And then I'm going to go to checkout. So make sure that those are the two things in my shopping cart. It's $89.56. So that's $71.58 for the items and $17.98 for shipping. Proceed with checkout. Put in my information, hit continue. Put in my credit card information. Okay, I can see that I have the, again, just reaffirming what everything's going to cost me, $89.56. I'm going to hit submit payment. It says it was successful of $89.56, successfully charged my card, and it's going to ship to this address. So let's double check that. I'm going to go, they wouldn't see this, but I'm going to go down and check my payments again. And then there's the $89.56, so we know they were charged the correct amount. It succeeded. And then I can see right here what the recipient shipping address is. So this is my Stripe account, so this is all looking like it's working as I expected. All right, so it is a little bit after 8 o'clock, and so I think we have quite a bit of time left. So let's go ahead and knock out Braintree. So what is Braintree? Braintree is basically like Stripe. It's another payment gateway. However, it is built by PayPal. So this is PayPal's new product for doing. It accepts credit cards. It accepts PayPal, of course. It accepts Apple Pay, Google Pay, all these different things you can do with this. And so if you have this or Stripe, you're going to be in really good shape. Having the ability to do either or is a great thing, and that's what I'm going to kind of, the way that we've coded this, we're not going to have to go back and change our cart. We're not going to have to change really anything. We're just going to add a few things, and it'll just work with another gateway, okay? So that's really what's the thing that I'm most excited to teach you guys, is why that works. Okay. So only thing I've done here is I've created my account with Braintree. So if you go to braintreegateway.com, you'll actually want to go to sandbox.braintreegateway.com and sign up for an account. They do make you, if you're going to use this for real money, you can't use the sandbox, and they make you go through an approval process, which Stripe will as well. But as developers, we can just sign up for their sandbox, and it's as if we had an account. And it's already approved, and we can write the code for it to work without spending any money or anything like that. Guys, I'm sorry if the rain's really loud. It's storming pretty bad here. And I can't help that I'm in a metal building, so. Okay, so let's dive right in, and you guys let me know if the rain's like really annoying you. I'm really sorry, but I don't know what I can do about it. But let's see. What I want to do is let's go ahead and find the documentation for Braintree. So what I'm going to do is open another tab, and I'm going to say Braintree Gateway documentation. Just Google it. So here's the Braintree developer documentation. So I'm going to go there. Uh-oh. Alright, so here they say that they have SDKs, which is great. They say they have SDKs for PHP, which is awesome. That means they've written a library for us that we can just use their code to interact with their API. And anytime you can do that, I think it's a good idea to do that. So we are going to use their SDK with PHP. So they have a tutorial and integration guide and examples and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and let's look at their integration guide. Internet seems to be slowing down with the storm as well. So it tells us basically, here's the key concepts, the overview. So you read through the overview, it tells you the flow of how everything works. And I'll tell you this much, it works really similar to Stripe, just a little bit different. But it basically says you're going to request a client token from the server. Then your server generates and sends a client token back to our client, which is the people visiting our site. And once the client SDK is initialized, the customer has submitted payment information. The SDK communicates that information. It gets something called a payment method nonce, or whatever the heck that means. But that's basically an ID or a token, okay? And then you then send that payment method nonce to our server, and then our server code receives the payment method from the client, okay? And then that creates the transaction. I know that sounds a little bit kind of confusing, but we're going to go through it. So then it tells you to set up the API keys. So you get your API keys by basically getting an account. And then it tells us to set up the client. So that's the next page. We set up the client. And we're using JavaScript here, so no big deal there. It gives us some HTML that we can paste right into our form. It tells us how we get our client token, okay? And then we need to do the back-end work, which so I'm going to click on Simple Server. By default, it's selecting Ruby. Well, we're not using Ruby, we're using PHP. And then it tells us here, and this is the part we're going to start with, is it tells us how to install and configure the PHP SDK. So it tells us we can download it directly and add it to our project, or we can use Composer. So we're going to use Composer. And once we've done that, it just kind of tells us how to finish up this process. Okay, so this is how we're not going to follow this exactly, because I've already done this, and I'll kind of lead you through that. I think it's a little easier than a documentation, but I'm just showing you how I figured out how to do this Braintree thing ahead of time. Okay, I just read through their documentation. I didn't do anything magic. I just worked on it until I got it done. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this Composer install thing. So what we're going to do is we are going to actually require this into our Composer. So let me jump over here. So we have Composer installed, and last week in my thing it was broken for me. I think I have that resolved now, unless something else is broken since then. So I'm going to close a lot of this so you don't have to look at it. But if you look here at our composer.json, we have TinyMCE, which we're using for our WYSIWYG, and we have Stripe, but we don't have the Braintree thing. So let's install that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this information here. And then I'm going to go to my terminal, and let me just type Composer. Make sure Composer works. Yep. So Composer works, and so I'm going to type Composer require, and I'm going to paste that, and then I'm going to clean this up a little bit. So they're telling us this is the version I want to require. So Braintree PHP version 3.40.0. I'm going to hit enter, and hopefully if nothing's broken on my Composer this week, this will go really smooth. So it looks like it's updating the dependencies. It should be able to fetch this information and install it. So let's just let that happen. Oh my gosh. Why did this break again? All right. Again, this is probably only broken for me because I'm on Linux and I updated. And what broke it last time is probably similar to what broke it this time. Is PHP updated on my machine, and for some reason it didn't install all of my stuff. So what I'm going to do here is search for PHP 7.2 and oh my gosh. Extension DOM is missing on my system. So let me look at that. That could be, okay. Let's look at that real quick. So package, I really don't think any of you guys are going to have any of these composer issues. So I still think composer is the easier way to go here. I really think this is an issue with me on my Linux machine. So I'm looking for the DOM PHP 7 thing. So extension DOM. Okay, so it's saying I need this package. I'm going to mark that, apply it. Hopefully with any luck, this will be the only thing I'm missing for this to work. And we will move on. Again, all I'm doing, guys, to even figure this out is reading the information they gave me and seeing if I can resolve it. I don't have any like magic guru skills that you guys don't have. You guys have everything that I have at your disposal. So hopefully, so composer.json has been updated. So if we looked at that right now, it would show that it's going to require that. And now it looks like it installed. Okay, so thank you for bearing with me. Now we look at our composer.json, we do have the Braintree, and it's the version that we asked it to install for us. And then if we look inside vendor, we have the Braintree SDK now. So if you look at that under lib, basically here are all the classes. They've given us all these files. Everything that you see here was given to us by PayPal, and this is what we mean by SDK. It's our library they've given us to use so that we can just quickly integrate with their APIs without anything crazy. Okay? Now that we have that, let's talk a little bit about how we're going to go about using it. One second, let me close down some reference here. But we're going to talk about how we're going to go about using this. So let's close down just basically most of this right now, because I want to show you guys how this is going to work. So we'll open up our config file. We do need to get our API keys. And by the way, guys, I had a lot of people asking about config files and whether or not they're secure to put sensitive information here, like your database information, and also like your API keys and stuff. And what I can tell you is, look, do not put this stuff on public repositories inside of GitHub or anything like that. Make sure they're in private. I have this stuff on public for you guys to use and see, but this isn't really going to hurt me because this is all just my sandbox stuff and everything. But if you were doing this live, you would not want this file on a public repository or anywhere that anybody can get this. Okay, you'd probably actually want to store this stuff in like environment variables on your server and not have it in this file at all, and then have like a local hidden file that points that this stuff gets loaded in. But that's kind of out of the scope of this tutorial right now. I just wanted to bring that up. Don't put sensitive information in anything that could be given to the public, okay? I only have it here because, you know, this isn't going to hurt me if anybody steals this information right now. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we have this in the gateway settings, we have this gateway constant defined, and we set it to Stripe. My goal is that I can set this to Stripe, or in this case we're going to say Braintree, and then any additional ones we add or decide to add, I can just change this value in this one place, and then it's going to use that gateway instead of Stripe. So I'm going to go ahead and change that now, so it's not going to use Stripe anymore from our pay thing. We're going to build out the Braintree method, and then we can switch back and forth in our config file between Braintree and Stripe, and it'll just work. Okay, so that's the concept and what we're going to do there. And how we do that, if you look in app and go to lib and gateways, we do that because we're using an abstract method or an abstract class here, and we're telling it like, hey, you guys, anytime you create a gateway integration, it's going to happen, and it's going to extend this abstract gateway class. And when it does that, we're telling it you have to have a get view, you need a process form, a charge, a handle charge response, and create transaction. You need all of this stuff when you extend this. So if you look at our Stripe gateway, we have all of that: process form, charge, handle charge response, parse shipping address, all this stuff that we told it has to have. We have all that. So guess what? We're going to create a new gateway for Braintree that has to have all of those methods. If we don't put those in there, it's going to throw an error. We're going to get an error. Okay, so let's get started. And let's see, where should I start? I guess I won't show you guys the back end. Basically what I need to do is grab my API keys from Braintree and put them in the config file. So rather than going in and showing you any sensitive information that might be in there, I'm just going to copy them from another screen. But you would just go into your account settings and get those information. Okay, it's not a big deal. So let me pull that up real quick. And there's 3 things we're going to need there. Actually 4, looks like. So let me open my config file, and I'm just going to paste this stuff in, and I'll talk you through it. Alright, so basically we're defining a Braintree merchant ID. So this is my unique ID for my merchant. This is me, my account. Yours will be different. And then you need to tell it the Braintree environment. We're in sandbox. You would change that to live if you were ready to go live with this. So, but we're in development mode right now, so we're in the sandbox. And then we have a public and private key, much like our Stripe stuff here. Our Stripe has a public and private, and we have a public and private key for Braintree as well. Okay, so that's the configuration that we needed to add so that we can use those API keys. And we're going to use that, and we're going to use our newly installed Braintree SDK to do our integration with Braintree, which is PayPal. Okay. All right. So the first thing, let's see, we're going to need is, let's go ahead and build out at least the beginnings of our Braintree gateway, and we need to update our factory that builds it. Okay. So we, inside of our lib gateways, we have a factory here just called gateway, and we're going to need to add to this method, the build method right here. Okay. All right. So we're going to do that. So I'm going to say else. So, and actually we're going to do an else if statement. So else if gateway. And this time we're checking it if it's equal to Braintree. So if it's equal to Braintree in our config, then we're not going to return Stripe. Instead, we're going to return a new Braintree gateway. Okay? So new Braintree gateway. And then we're going to change this, but for now we're going to pass in the card ID. Later we're going to update that. So that's it for our factory for now. Like I said, we're going to update this to where it doesn't take the card ID, because later we might want to use other stuff when we don't have the card ID. and we'll fix that, not a big deal. The next thing we need to do is add a new file here in the gateways, and we're going to call it Braintree gateway.php. Alright, so what we need to do here, the first thing to always do is we need to define our namespace. So our namespace in this situation is app lib gateways. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we need to use app lib gateways because we're going to extend our abstract gateway, so we need to import that. So abstract gateway, which we're not really importing, but we're setting up this stuff. The next thing we want to do is we actually want, while we're here, let's just finish out some of this. We need to use Braintree. Now this is actually how we're going to use the SDK. So that's Braintree, and then they use a gateway class. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is, for debugging purposes, I'm just going to load in core h. So that's our helper file, and then we're going to load in our app models. Now remember, we need this because we're going to have to create the transactions, so we're just going to do it now. We need our transactions and carts. Alright, so that's it for that. Now we need to actually define the class. So we're going to say class Braintree gateway, and that will extend our abstract gateway. Now, that is the class. So now what happens, Sarah, hello, welcome. We are just starting our integration with Braintree. Let's see if I can log back in here. My session expired. All right, so if I refresh here, let's see, let's add something to our cart. Check out. All right, so now we have an error, and this is important, and this is the crux of why this whole system works. Okay, this error right here is very important, so get your eyes on this error. Let me take a drink, my mouth is so dry. All right, you see right here where it says fatal error. Class Braintree gateway contains 5 abstract methods and must therefore be declared abstract or implement the remaining methods. What that's saying, that's just a kind of a weird way of saying that we have not implemented everything in our abstract. So you see, because we extended this abstract gateway and we go to the abstract, this is an abstract class, and we have all of these abstract methods defined here inside of here, which means what we're doing is saying, okay, if you don't understand what this means, basically all it's saying is I'm a parent class, and if anyone's going to extend me, if I'm going to have any children, they must have these methods. They must do these things. If they do these things, they're my child. If they're my child and they don't do things, it's going to cause an error. Okay? So this is what protects us in the future from creating other integrations that won't work. Because we set this up as an abstract class, we have these abstract methods, and now we have to implement those, or our application will throw this error. Okay, so let's go ahead now, and I'm going to show you how to fix that error. We're just going to copy all of these abstract methods right here, and we'll go to the Braintree gateway class, and let's paste those in. All I'm going to have to do here is we need to just define them, even if they don't do anything. Okay, and then we'll come over here, get rid of these semicolons, and do that. So now we've assigned all of these, we've defined all of these methods. Now they don't do anything yet, they will, but we've defined all of these methods here, and now if I go back and refresh, we don't have that error. And it's because we've at least defined all the methods that we said that we promised we were going to define when we extended this abstract gateway. Okay, does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. This is a protection for us, and it makes sure that all of our method names match between the Stripe gateway and the Braintree gateway. Okay, they all have the same method names. That's why inside of our carts controller, we can just call let's see, in our checkout, that's why we can just call stuff like gateway process form. And it doesn't care if we're in Stripe or if we're in Braintree in the rest of our code, because we're actually just pointing into the gateway. Our gateway build function right here, it just actually builds those methods out. Okay, so it knows it's either going to return the Stripe gateway or it's going to return this Braintree gateway or any other gateway in the future that we're using based upon our config. That's why this works, and that's why it's so important that you guys learn this method of programming, because it's very, very powerful. Okay, it allows us to have everything stand alone so it can be tested, and our integrations, we can do different things in here. It's just called the same methods, and then we use those inside of the rest of our code. It doesn't matter if we're using Braintree or Stripe, we're using the same exact method calls. Okay, so that's why we did it that way. I know it's kind of but that also avoids a bunch of if-else statements and things like that. This is a really powerful thing, a concept with programming that's important for you to learn. If you don't understand it right now, that's okay. Just go through this, and hopefully by the end of it you'll understand, but watch it again and again until you get it, okay? I also in the live episode 2, I explained this a little more. We built some more abstract classes there as well. It wasn't payment gateway stuff, but it was similar in strategy. Okay, so let's dive in and see what we need to do to go ahead and build this out. The first thing we need to do is if we fill out the shipping information and we go to continue, we have a problem here, and that's because we don't have our credit card information for Braintree yet. We don't have a view for that. Okay, so what we're going to do is go ahead and take care of that first, which will be super simple. Well, it'll be somewhat simple, but that is because this get view right here, we need this to be populated. So let's go ahead now and add that. And all that is going to do is return a string, and it's going to tell it where the view lives for that credit card form. So it's going to be card form Braintree. Okay, that's where we're going to put a view. So let's go ahead and create that view. So if we go to views and we go to card forms, let's create a new file, and we're just going to call it braintree.php. That will be that. So let me open that up and we'll get that going. So what we're going to do here is we're going to need our form helpers. So we're going to say use core form helpers, and then let's set the site title. So this set site title, we're going to set that to checkout. Let's see. Doesn't like something here. I'm missing my semicolon there. Okay. And then what we're going to do is do this start body. Okay. I'm going to skip down a few lines and we'll do this end. Okay. So this isn't, I'm going to kind of talk you through, actually we're going to need to add something to the head too, because we need to include the Braintree JavaScript here. And I don't want to add that to my layout because we only need it on this page. and I don't want to have that loaded in when I don't need it. So we're going to do this start head, and this will add this to the head section inside the HTML. So this end, and I'm looking. Remember that Braintree? Where'd it go? This documentation. We have this set up your client. Basically, I got most of this code from going through this, but I'm going to copy it from my reference material and we'll go through it, okay? So essentially we need to include their JavaScript SDK to get their form elements, okay? And that, I just copied it from their documentation, is right here. Now I'm not using they have this, their example shows this drop-in. I'm not using a drop-in. I didn't really like that. I want it to be styled more like our stuff. And so I'm using, or maybe I am. Yes, I am using. Actually, I can probably copy this right from their documentation just to show you. I'll copy some of it. But basically, yeah, this all just came from the documentation. I just have a little bit more of updates that I added. So I'm gonna go ahead and fill in the HTML here, and let's go through it. Basically, we have a class with a row. This is a div, and then we have our two columns. Remember, we want it to be the same as our Stripe view, where we had a first column was our credit card detail information, our form, and then the next column had our product preview off to the side of it to show them that the products they're purchasing. It's basically like a confirmation. Hey, you're purchasing these things. So there's nothing different there. We also had our cross-site request forgery input. We have our hidden inputs for our shipping. We have one additional one here for the payment method noints, or however you say that, but that comes basically from their code. We're going to populate that when they get that information back from their servers. Okay, it's basically going to be the value, so I have that. The other thing that we have that they had right in their documentation is this drop-in container, and the drop-in container is what the JavaScript is going to replace for the card form, okay? Remember, we don't want the card information going to our servers. That's why we had to do it this way. And then we just have the submit button. That's no different than our other one. So we have submit payment. Okay, so that's it for the HTML. The next up is going to be our JavaScript. So I'm going to copy that, and we'll spend a little bit of time on this because this is a little bit more complex. It's not complex, but it's a little bit more. So let's look at this. What we're doing here is basically we're setting some variables up for the form, and I don't think I need this button one here at all. So actually I'm going to get rid of that. So what we're doing is we have this form, so we're getting it by ID. So I called it Braintree form. So if you look up here, this whole form right here has an ID of Braintree form. So we're setting that with JavaScript with document.getElementById, so it finds it and it sets it to this variable called form. Then what we're doing is we're adding an event listener. The event listener is listening for the submit to happen. When the submit happens, we're going to prevent the default action, which is submitting to our server. Because remember, we don't want to submit to our server, we want to submit it to Braintree. So we're going to prevent that from going to our server with this line right here. The next thing that we're going to do is we need to create this Braintree drop-in. This is their SDK. So remember right here where we included this drop-in.min.js has an object called Braintree.dropin, and then we just use the create method, and then we pass this information in here. So we're telling it what container, The container is the drop-in container right here. That's the ID, and that's just this empty div. So they're going to populate that with the credit card form. That's what this is going to do. The next thing we do is we add an event listener on the click of the button, and I deleted that. I was wrong. I didn't need that. So sorry, I'm going to add that back in. That's what that was for. Sorry, I forgot what that was for. This button right here, it calls button.addEventListener, so it's looking for that click. And once this happens, it runs this request payment method, and from the payload, we get this Noints. We get a payload back from their server that has that Noints thing or whatever. It's basically a token, okay? So all we're doing at that point is we're finding this hidden input, and we're going to populate that value right there with this JavaScript. So this Noints input.value equals payload.Noints. That's what we get back from them, payload.Noints. And then we do form submit. So we stop the form submitting here, but once we get it back, that information from them, that Noints stuff, we're going to submit it at that point. So I know that's kind of a long explanation, and it might be a little confusing, so you might have to rewind it after this video and watch that again to understand it. But it's not really that complex. It's a little bit of JavaScript that it just waits for their server to send something back, and we're putting it right here so that we have that. Now, there's a couple things we don't have yet that we need to do. One thing is we need this token, this gateway token. We don't have that information, so we need to add that. So what we're going to do is change up our Stripe gateway and our Braintree gateway, and what we're gonna do is add we're gonna add a new method just to the top of it here. Not a method, I'm sorry, a property. And we're just gonna say needs token true. And then on Stripe, we're gonna do the same exact thing at the beginning of the Stripe method. We're gonna add a new property here, but this one did not need any sort of token. Okay, so we're just going to set that one to false. The reason we're doing that is because we need to send that information to the view. Because if you look at, remember, here's our view, and we have this gateway token. Well, if that's set, we need to send it down to this view, but we didn't need that in Stripe, so there's a little bit of a difference there. So all we need to do there to make that work is we need to go back to our cart controller, and let's see, cart controller. Yeah, so controllers, cart controller, and then our checkout action up here, right below our gateway. What we're going to do is we're going to say gateway, or we're going to do an if statement. We're going to say if gateway, and then all we need to do here is say if gateway needs token. That's what we called it, needs token. So if the gateway needs the token, then we're going to call gateway view. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to pass with the view. We're going to say this view gateway token is equal to gateway get token. Now you haven't seen get token yet. This get token, you know what? We don't even really need to do some of this. What we could do, this is probably the better way to do it. In the abstract gateway, we're going to add a new abstract public function called get token. Okay, that's it. Then that's going to force us to have this get token method in all of our gateways. So we're going to have to add that here. And I'm going to get rid of this needs token thing. We don't need that. That was just bad programming on my part, because I'm going to show you what's better. The better thing to do here is we're just going to, in our Stripe gateway, we didn't need that, so we're gonna define it. We're gonna say public function get token, and all we're gonna do here in our Stripe gateway is return false. Okay, that's not gonna hurt anything. But now we have this get token. We don't need it, but we do need it in other gateways. So we're gonna say get token is returns false. That's all that's gonna happen in Stripe gateway. Then our Braintree gateway, we can get rid of this needs token thing here. We don't need that. But we do need to define public function get token. Okay? Now we have to do a little bit of work on the Braintree one because we actually have to get the token. So let's look at what that looks like. We're going to set up our gateway, and that's going to equal a new gateway. Now this is a function, or a class rather, that we got from using that composer require Braintree. So we're going to use that. So according to their documentation, this gets an array. And inside of that array, it gets an environment. And you can guess what this is all going to be now. We have defined this stuff in our config. So we need Braintree underscore environment. And then it gets a merchant ID. And we called that Braintree merchant ID. Okay, and then it gets the public key. Public key. So Braintree public key. Let me just double check those values. So if I open up the config, we had the Braintree merchant ID, and we didn't have key. We just had environment, public, and private. So public, and then private key. Braintree, oops, I need the caps locks there. Braintree private. All right. So once we set up that gateway, that's what they require for the gateway to be set up. And then all we need to do is get our token then. So our token is gonna, they have a method on the gateway called client token. And then they had a method called generate. So this generates a client token, and then all we're going to do is return that token. Okay? So then what we can do is inside of our cart controller, we don't need this if statement anymore. We can simply copy this line, go down here to the bottom, where we're defining all these view variables, and we can say this view gateway token, and then we just call the gateway get token, and then we have access to that in the view. So for Stripe, that'll be false, but for Braintree, it's actually going to do an API call and get that token for us, and that's what this method does. Okay, so moving right along. Let's go back now to the Braintree thing. That's what this is right here. We've gotten that token. It's going to load it here in the JavaScript, so that we've gotten that token from the API. Okay. So let's go and I guess let's just see if that works first of all. So I'm going to refresh here. We have an undefined property needs token. And that was in cart controller 61, and that's because I forgot to remove that if statement at the top here. So we can get rid of all of this again. We don't need that. Refresh. All right, so it didn't give us an error, so presumably we have that token. I'm gonna hit continue. It's saying that our Braintree view doesn't exist. So we need to double check that. We called it braintree.php. And it's in card forms. So let me go. Oh, I forgot my S right here. So that should fix that. Okay, so it took a second when it loaded, but and we could add some sort of loading screen or something like that in the future. But you can see what happened when we refreshed. It still went to the same form that our Stripe did to get our shipping information. But when we hit continue, instead of loading the Stripe payment stuff, it loaded this Braintree card. Now this was generated by that JavaScript and loaded in from our token, okay? And we'll be able to modify some of this, but essentially we will enter our card information here now. Expiration date 0221, CVV 123. Okay, so we haven't finished this yet, but submit payment now would actually submit back to our server, and we would run that process form thing. So we need to finish that out. We have about an hour left, so we're doing good on time, I think. Our Braintree form, I believe we're done here. And again, I just got all this information from their documentation. I just copied it all in. The only thing I changed was I added these the shipping input fields and the cross-site request forgery and that stuff. I just added some of that information. Okay, I also added this so that it works the way I want it to. Okay, so that's done. I'm gonna go ahead and close that. Remember how I said we were going to update something? I'm going to go ahead and do that now so that we don't have to pass the cart ID into when we're building. So let me show you what I mean. After contemplating on this a little bit, I don't want to pass cart ID into this build method because I might want to use this gateway at other times when I don't have a shopping cart. For example, if I want to do an API call to Braintree or to Stripe to get transactions, I don't have a cart ID when I do that. So I think using that in the build function was a bad design decision on my part. So we're going to fix that really easily. So all we need to do is go, first of all, I'm just going to remove this from here. And we're going to not pass that. So now we need to go to the abstract gateway, and we were using that to populate our items, okay? And I don't really want to do that. Instead, what I want to do is I want to add a new public function here called populate items, okay? And what I'm going to do is we're going to pass cart ID into that. And essentially, this is going to be the same code. I'm actually just going to take all the code out of this constructor and put it in there, okay? So we're going to just copy all of this out of this constructor. I could have just renamed that, and paste it in here. And then I'm going to get rid of this constructor. I don't need it because we're not doing anything with that at this time. And we're just doing it all on the side of a populate items. Okay. The next thing I need to do is update our factory to not pass in this cart ID in the build. So I'm going to get rid of the cart ID and all of this. Okay. And then the only other thing I need to do to fix that to be the way that I want it is in our cart controller, we need to go ahead and populate those items. So right here after this build, we're just going to call a separate function just called gateway populate items, and we'll pass in that cart ID here. Now I know that adds one line of code that we have to add to populate those instead of just happening in the build. But you'll see why we need to do that later when we need to do other API calls on those gateways. So we only want to populate the items when we need. So let's just make sure we didn't break anything there. Let me go back to checkout. And I can tell you right now we didn't, because this is all populating this thing here. That's all good. So we're in pretty good shape. Alright, so we didn't break anything, and we're ready to finish out this checkout experience for Braintree. If you guys have any questions, please ask them. I don't want to leave anybody behind. Alright, so the rest of the work that we need to do is just in this Braintree gateway. We just need to finish out these methods, okay? So let's get going on that. Let's look at the process form. The process form in this case, we're just going to set charge equal to this charge. Not much different than, we're going to pass post into that. That's not any different than before. So since we have that, let's go jump down and do the actual charge. So we're in the charge function, our method rather, and we're going to say gateway, and we're actually going to, I just thought of something else. What we want to do, I was going to copy this code, but anytime you're about to copy something, it's probably a good idea to not copy code. It's called don't repeat yourself, okay? So what I'm going to do so I don't have to copy code there is I'm going to create a protected function, and we're just going to call this, we'll call this get gateway. Okay, and I'm going to copy all of this stuff right here. Actually, I'm going to copy that, and then we'll just return gateway. Okay, so then here in our get token, all we need to do is say gateway is equal to this get gateway. And that's it. So now where I was about to copy this code, here in this charge, we need the gateway again. So I can just say gateway is equal to this get gateway. Okay. And then we're going to say result is equal to gateway. And I got all this information from their documentation, guys. So this gateway transaction, that's a method they have on there, and they have that generates a transaction object, and then they have a sale method. So we're going to do a sale, and that accepts an array. All right, so this array gets a few things. It gets the amount, and this amount is just going to be this grand total. All right, it gets the payment method noints. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. That's a ridiculous word to me. But it's just basically that token. So this, and actually that's gonna come from data payment method noints. All right. So that comes from the post information. Remember, we generated that in that hidden input with our JavaScript. Okay, so that's that. Then we need shipping, and shipping, we had this parse shipping address method. So we'll pass data into that, and we still need to create that. We haven't done that yet. And then there was options, and their options is an array, and it's just they want you to pass submit for settlement, and that will be equal to true. Okay, The next thing that they had in their documentation is you can actually send custom fields. And I want to send, as a custom field, I want to send cart ID. And I'm going to say this cart ID. Now this is a custom field I had to set up in the back end of my Braintree account. I had to add a custom field called cart ID. And once I did that, this will actually populate that. And then all we're going to do here is return result. That's it. That's our entire charge function, okay? I got this from their documentation. You create the transaction in the sale. You tell it how much you're going to charge. You're going to pass that special token that we got back from them back to them so they know how to charge the card. You're going to send the shipping address and then this submit for settlement, which basically finalizes the charge to their card. Okay, and then they send back a result and we're going to do things with that, okay? So one thing we haven't done yet is we haven't set up this parse shipping address. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to set up a protected function parse shipping address, and we'll take that takes the data, and that's an array, and we're just going to return an array here. And inside of that array, the way that they did it on their API, I'm going to send the name actually as company. Okay, so data. Otherwise, I have to split that by first and last name, so I'm just going to do it in the company part, which is fine for me. You might find that you want to do something different there. But then they have street address, and this is what we're sending them, guys, not the way we called it in the database, but we have to basically translate this from our post data. So it's shipping address 1, and then they had extended address, and we called that shipping address 2. All right. Oops, I put a period there. And then they had locality, and that was actually the shipping city is what we called that in our form. So basically, guys, I'm just mapping our values to the way they expect it to be sent to them. That's all this is doing right here. So that was shipping state. And the last one was postal code. And of course we called that shipping zip. Okay, so that all this parse shipping address does is it parses our information and puts it in the format that they're expecting it. So they're expecting it to be company, street address, extended address, locality, region, and postal code. And then we're putting all those values in there, okay? So that'll populate this shipping part of this transaction. All right. So let's go ahead and let's just do right here in this process form. Let's go ahead and do our dump and die here and see what we get back from them. So let's see if this all works. So we'll actually make a charge right now and get a response back from their API. So we're going to try to buy Catan here. So 4242. Okay. Let's see. Something didn't happen that should have happened here. Let's try again so I can see if there's an error. So we're making a call to Braintree. All right, let's take a look here because it's not actually sending it to our servers. We're not getting to this process form thing. So let's open back up our Braintree.php. Let's see, Braintree form. Inspect this real quick. All right, so we did get this part's working. It did take our payment method noints and it populated that, so that's correct. We expected that, so that it's getting down to this line. For some reason, this form.submit doesn't seem like that's happening. So let's figure out why. Braintree.form. Okay. Not really sure what's going on here, so I might have to do some JavaScript debugging. I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a console log, and I'm just going to console log form to make sure that I have that. So let's try again. I did have another idea as well. Okay, so so we have a problem in the action of our form. We have an undefined property core view cart ID. So we're not passing cart ID. That's what the problem is, more than likely, which is an easy fix. And all we need to do to fix that is go to our cart controller and let's see, cart ID camel case. Oh, I have underscore ID here, so it is camel case, not an underscore. All right, so let's see what happens now. We might have a little bit more luck. Probably not, though. I think there might be one other issue with my JavaScript here. Nope. Okay, that worked. All right, so we have an undefined property, get gateway, and on line 26. So let's take a look at that. And that's because I forgot my parens there. So I try to access it like a property when that's intended actually to be a method. Let's try again. All right. So here we go. We did get a response back from Braintree. This is our response, and we just need to look through this information. So let's see, success was true. So it's saying that it did go through. So if I go now and look at this, I should have a sale inside of this. I don't know if it comes up immediately or if there's some sort of caching. So let's look for our sales, our transactions here. Yep, April 30th at 9:20. We had one, so let's click on it. And let's make sure. So cart ID was set. Our shipping information is set. Here's our credit card information. Looks like everything went through perfectly. So, essentially all we need to do now, guys, is finish up the last few functions inside of our Braintree thing. We know that the transaction's happening, but it would not have added this transaction in the database. Notice here we don't have one for Braintree because we haven't finished the rest of that out. So let's go ahead now and try to finish the rest of these functions. So we know that we have this information coming back from our charge. Our charge method is working as expected. So the next thing that we need to do inside of our process form is handle our charge response. Okay, so we'll say this handle charge response, and we're going to pass the charge into that. So let's go down now and finish that out. So right here we have that stubbed out. So we need to basically do the same thing we did before. We'll say this charge success is equal to charge success. Now the reason I know that is because we look at here, this is our response, this is our charge response, and then they had a success, so that's either true or false. So that one was really simple to get. And then the next thing that we want to do is set our message to user. So this message to user, and that was going to be equal to charge transaction processor response text. Okay, so if you look in the transaction, let's see, it was in transaction, and then there was a processor. Let's see if I can find it. There's a processor response text. So that came back as approved. So that's where I got that information. So that method's done now. We have those two things. The next thing we need to do in our process form is we need to set the transaction. So again, it'll just be tx is equal to this create transaction, and we're going to pass the charge into that. So now we just need to go and actually we have that stubbed out right here. We need to populate that. So I'm actually just going to copy this to save a little bit of time, and we'll go through it. So basically we create a new object called transactions. Now that's our model transactions right here. And we get the card ID. We set it, we have the property on this object called this card ID, so we just set that. Gateway, we have the static gateway. Let's make sure we have that set. And I have not set that yet. So this will be, let's see, public static gateway, and that was equal to Braintree. Okay, so that will set up right here. And then the type, they have that set in the transaction, the response transaction, and then payment instrument type. So if we look for that, we could just search their response for payment instrument type, and that was credit card. So if you look at payment instrument type, that was credit card for us. The amount is just going to be the grand total. Success is whether or not charge success is true or false. The charge ID, they sent back a transaction ID. So if I look for transaction, let's see. Here's their transaction, and then they had it inside of that. They had an ID. So that right there is their transaction ID. That's going to be our charge ID. The reason, they had a gateway rejection reason. Card brand, inside the transaction they had a credit card array, so just card type, so that'll be Visa. They had the last four, so we just set that up. They have shipping, so we just went through. They had shipping company, street address, extended locality, region, postal code, and country name. And I can show you all that real quick. This is not unlike how we did Stripe. So here's our shipping, and then inside of here, here's all of our shipping information. So I just grabbed it from there. Not doing anything magic here, guys. So there it is. And then we save the transaction and we return it. And that's all we need to do for that method. So the next thing we need to do in our process form is we need to, if the transaction was successful, we need to go ahead and finish the card out and delete their cookie. So remember, in the process form here, right underneath that transaction, we could say if this charge success, if that's true, then we're just going to say carts purchase cart. And then we're going to pass into that this cart ID. Okay, that's the method we built earlier to purchase that cart. And that essentially just sets that boolean to true if it's been purchased, and then it deletes their cookie. All right, the last thing that we need to do here is just return an array. And again, this is going to be, it's going to have success. And we're going to say this charge success. Message is this message to user. Transaction is just going to be our transaction we just created. And then our charge ID is going to be charge ID. Okay? Let me see if I'm missing anything else here. I think we're actually done with that. Let's do some testing. Yeah, let's just test it out and see what happens. So now if I just go and try to purchase this, it loads in this, save. Okay, we have an error. It says undefined variable charge in payment gateway 45. So let's take a look at that. And that's for some reason I typed out the entire word instead of CH there. We had another one trying to get property success. Both of those are probably the same error. So let's try it again. Okay, call to undefined method, create I spelled that incorrectly. So if we look in the process form, looks like I forgot the N right here. Create transaction. Sorry about that. We will get through this. This is why we test it, obviously. Another typo. We're getting closer though. Purchase cart. I forgot the R, or didn't type when I hit it or something. Either way, it's not there. All right. All right, so we got a little further. Undefined property on Braintree. We have a result error ID on line 49. So let's take a look at that real quick. That looks like an error. It actually looks like an error on their side. Let me try this again because that could have been an API fail. Okay, yeah. I'm assuming that API just failed last time for some reason. But this worked. Thank you. Your purchase of $58.99 was successful. So we got the same exact thank you page as we did from Stripe. But if I look at my transactions now, we have some Braintree transactions. That's from me going through and testing that out. We actually saw one here. This one success was 0, and it failed because it was a duplicate transaction. So we're not doing any error handling right now, which we would need to do at some point. But that's the reason that failed. Let's see. Let's look at that real quick. It's hard to make those fail though. So that's probably the reason, let's just look at that. If not response success, I think what we need to do here, if response success is not equal to true, not really sure. That's probably a little bit different of a situation we need to do some error handling on, but essentially that works now. So now we can create a new shopping cart item, check out, proceed to checkout, go through the entire process again. All right, $45.95. If I go to Braintree and we go back to our transactions, we'll just search them. You can see the one that just came in here is $45.95. And you can see all the information here is correct. So that's working. Let's make sure we didn't break Stripe now that we've done all that work for Braintree. So let's go back now and just go to our config file. And this is what's super cool. Now that we've done that, we can just change this Braintree back to Stripe. And let's go and continue home. Now let's buy this. Check out. So now it loads our Stripe form instead of our Braintree form. Check out. Takes us to the thank you page. Let's look at the database. And now we can see that the transaction went through Stripe and we have those set up. So you can see now why this is, hopefully you can see why this is super powerful, because with the change of, if we set it up the right way, we can continue to add more gateways that interact or integrate with other payment gateways, and all we'd have to do is update this factory to build whatever new one it is, add a new gateway that extends this abstract gateway, and make sure we have all of the methods implemented inside of there. So you just kind of go through and you fill out one thing at a time and you get it working. I always start with the charge. So I build out the process form. I start with this charge. I follow their instructions to create the charge on the API call. And then I get that result and I dump and die that result so that then I know how to handle the create transaction stuff. And I know how to handle the parse shipping address and all of that. So you just need to set that up like that, guys. I know that you know, this might seem like a little weird to go through this process of setting it up this way. You guys go ahead and let me know in the comments if this has made sense. But setting this up in such a way allows us to very easily test just our gateway integrations and just our Stripe integrations separate. And then if we change our mind on what gateway we need to use later, or we allow people to choose what gateway they want to use with our system, it just already works. That's why when you purchase like plugins on like WordPress or whatever, you can choose different gateways. Like if you want to use Stripe or authorize.net or whatever, they've done a similar method to this probably on the back end, where they have all this code already written for each one, and then you and your config just choose which one you want to use in your settings, and it just uses that gateway. And probably you put in your API credentials, like your public and private keys and things like that, and it would do all that. So I've just taught you how to do that sort of thing through this. We could have just integrated with one thing. I just really wanted to teach you guys a way of integrating with more than one gateway with very little code. If you do it the right way, then anytime in my code, like say when we go to our admin dashboard, for example, let me log in real quick. If I remember all my information here. What we want to do at some point is on this dashboard, we're going to want to start displaying information about our transactions and our sales and everything like that. This is the back end of our shopping cart. And we want to put like reporting and stuff like this. Well, we may have to do some API calls. So when we do those API calls, we just need to add a method that does its individual API call to those gateways and gets that information and populates it. Okay? Denise asks, can you please show us again how to install the extension to see errors live through Atom? Oh, I know what you're talking about. Okay, so if I have an error right here, like I forget that, there's a thing called a linter that will, before I try to run my code, it'll put this red dot here, and it actually tells me I have some errors at the bottom here, and it even tells me, hey, in the description, it's showing me I have a semicolon. Oops, I have a semicolon that's expected on line 14 that is missing. So if I go to line 14 here, I'm sorry, it's on 19. So on line 19, I'm missing a semicolon. Once I add that, then it goes away. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. I'm so stupid. Okay. Again, what she's talking about is a linter. Now, a linter tries to catch PHP errors as you're typing them. And so if I just accidentally forget this semicolon, then what it's going to do is it puts this red squiggly here, and it puts these red dots, and it tells you some information at the bottom. But if I hover over this, it's saying, hey, you have a syntax error, and it's saying you have an unexpected return. Well, what do you mean unexpected return? Well, it gets to this return and it doesn't know why it's here because there wasn't a semicolon after this. So if I have that semicolon, all my linter says, oh, everything's good, everything checks out. And there's actually even a green dot down here if you don't have any errors in your code. But if you do have errors, it will tell you why you have an error sometimes and things like that. Let's, for example, if I do this wrong here, or let's see, what if I do this? Yeah, so it doesn't since I use JavaScript all the time, I make this mistake a lot where I type a colon instead of the fat arrow when I'm building out arrays and stuff like that. So it'll actually tell you about that. So the way that you install that, if you go to an atom, if you go to Edit, Preferences, and you go to Install, if you just type PHP linter, I actually installed 2 here. It looks like I have linter-php, and I just hit install. And then there's another one here. I don't know if I installed this or if it was already installed, but there's this linter 2.3.0. Let me look at what this even is. Oh, this one looks like it's for CSS and JavaScript. Yeah, this one is a JavaScript linter here, this steel brain one. But the PHP one was called linter-php, and I just clicked install. So I just clicked the blue button on this one, and that's all. And you probably have to restart. You'll have to restart everything, and hopefully everything is set up. I do think there was also a situation where I needed to tell it on my specific computer where PHP lived on my computer. So let me go to packages, linter, and settings here. Oh, I guess I didn't. But I had the default path, which is PHP. You might have to set that to something else if you have some weird setup, but you may just try it out of the box. It should just work. And it actually said that I had an update available on that. I'm going to update to 1.6.1. So I hope that helps, Denise. I hope I'm saying your name right. I really suck at that kind of stuff. Okay, so guys, we just went through an amazing amount of stuff really, really quickly. So if you guys have any questions, please ask them. We have about a little less than 20 minutes left. And if you guys don't have any questions, we can end the live stream here. I think we're in a great stopping place. We're not going to start anything new tonight. Next week, we'll probably finish up some of the stuff we're missing on the shopping cart stuff. Like in our menu, we probably want to do is in our menu, if there's something in your shopping cart, have a little shopping cart icon with a number of items, and you click on that and it takes you to the shopping cart. So we'll do that definitely, and then we'll start possibly doing some of our admin stuff on the dashboard to show our sales and stuff on the back end, and also maybe show some alerts and things like that when somebody purchases something, so you know that you need to ship it. Okay. So if you guys have any questions, please, I'll give you a few seconds to respond in the comment section. And there are no dumb questions, guys. There are no stupid questions, because if you have a question, someone else may have. Robin says it was a great series. Thank you. I do my best. It's very difficult to teach this stuff. I don't know why it's so difficult to teach it. It's probably difficult because you're trying to type and think and talk all at the same time, and it's hard for me anyway. I don't know. But thank you. I'm glad. Does this make sense to you guys? Do you guys see the power of this? Not even just with shopping cart gateways, but like you can use this with a lot of different applications. Basically, you don't have to be shopping cart gateways, but like I use this same sort of stuff all the time at work. Like say we do filtering, and we have all these complex filters that we build out. Well, we'll use the same thing where we build an abstract filter, and then each type of filter we do extends that abstract, and each class might do its own things, like its own type of database SQL creation and things like that, so that it can make the call. But you can use this for a lot of different things if you get the concept of this. This is what's really super powerful about object-oriented programming, is the ability to do it this way. Yep. Uh, I'm glad Robin says, please make uh, a tutorial on React or Vue as a front end and PHP as a back end. I'm glad you said that because my next series that I'm going to do, I think I've kind of settled on what I'm going to do for sure next. And I think I'm going to do a social networking site. We'll build a social networking site like Facebook or something like that, or Twitter or whatever. And we will build it with React on the front end, and we'll use this a PHP backend. And I'm going to try to even set up WebSockets on PHP so that we can have real-time notifications and things like that, like real-time pushes and stuff like that. So do WebSockets, we'll do React, and yeah, that's what I'm going to do next. So not next week. Next week we're still working on this. I think we'll do this series. I want to finish up a few things and make sure it's somewhat complete. And if there's still interest and you guys have other questions, we'll continue this. But as soon as we're done with this, I'm going to take some time to do some research and build out this social networking site and get ready to teach you guys that next. So with that, guys, if you guys don't have any other questions, I mean, we can call it a night and take off a little bit early. You guys, I know you're tired and want to get on with it. Go back and watch this stuff again and code it out for yourself. Don't just look at my code. Code this yourself because it'll help you learn it. Put dump and dies everywhere after every line of code if you need to see what happens. Okay? That's how you learn. Don't ever be scared to break stuff, guys. You can always go back and pull the branch again, but mess with it. Get in there and try to make it better. Try to break it. Try to find bugs that I've made and things like that and fix them. All right, so with that, guys, I think we'll just call it a night. Thank you guys very, very much. This has been really fun for me. I know that our attendance has kind of gone down here towards the end, but that's to be expected. Anytime you're doing anything hard, people either get busy or they kind of drop off. And so I'm not discouraged by that. And as long as you guys are getting something out of this, I'm blessed by that. So with that, guys, God bless you. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you guys, Lord willing, next week. Let me see if I can figure out how to shut this thing off. Peace out.